This week on the program, we recap the crazy weekend in Texas, which still isn't the biggest state in the union. Jimmie Johnson stops by and talks about British pubs, among other things. We dive into NASCAR's obsession with Dr. Phil. And Kyle Larson does a rain dance, or not, at Indy. Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which really isn't live, but a poorly produced podcast, where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally, we have a special guest or two, when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, hold on tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Green flag, green. Go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Speed Talk Live. I'm Greg Engel. The week of April 15th, tax day, the tax man has cometh, and we're coming out of Texas. I am here with my favorite law student, Owen Johnson. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Greg, you're doing great. How about you?
Good. I know this is the last day. You're in the States. You're heading back over to London, and you're going to be heading back over there. And you've got exams coming up, and so I know you're spending the last few hours with family and friends before you go over. How's your short time been here back in America?
It's been great. I've been enjoying watching some NASCAR. I got to go up to Martinsville, as we talked about last week, and I've been getting some studying in for the exam. So it's been a good mix of both. There
you go. So now you're all studied up and you're all NASCAR'd up for now. And we came out of Texas, which, to be honest, I'm going to be completely honest, boys and girls, I wasn't expecting a lot to happen at Texas. Boy, was I wrong, because sound the siren, Chase Elliott finally ends his winless streak. And the siren sounded in Dawsonville, Georgia, like it has for when his dad won. And now with his win, first race in 42 races, stretching back 18 months. And there was a long winless stretch. Of course, he was out with a broken leg from snowboarding. And then he had the one race suspension. He went through a lot of difficult time last year, but you know what? All of that's forgotten. All of that's forgiven. But one thing that really stood out to me about what he said in his post race was, he's been open about this journey with his car. And we were wondering, did he let the self-doubt creep in? Did he wonder if it was him, if it was the car? And how did he not let that get into him and bother him and get him to where he actually now has a win?
Yeah, it's obviously very tough, and I think as the longer it goes and the more ways you find to either not run good or lose races, it can make it tougher. But to me, honestly, this journey and everything about today is really a credit to the guys that sit in our meetings on Monday mornings in the 9 room, and that starts with Alan. And as I mentioned a second ago, it's really easy when things go bad to jump ship and go do something different, or for those guys to go elsewhere. It just is, and it happens a lot. But it's been a extremely important thing to me, and fortunately to our entire group, to try to climb this mountain again together and try to get back to where we need to be as a group. We're not all together, but a lot of us are still there that have been on our team for most of my 9 years, and that's pretty special. So I look at it as a credit to them, because I think they've made me better and they've pushed me to be better, helped me identify some of my faults and some of my bad habits, and been patient with me as I've addressed them, or at least started to. And again, as I referenced a second ago, I think I have still work to do, no doubt. We had a lot of stuff go our way today, but we've been back in the mix more often, and that is certainly progress, and I think that is worth being proud of.
So I don't know if you knew this, Owen, But the Dawsonville Pool Room, famous place there in Dawsonville, Georgia, where the Elliott family still lives. Then, of course, they got that siren. They sounded it when his dad won, and now with Chase winning, they haven't had a chance to blow that siren since 2022, since October 2022, the last time Chase won. And I don't know if you knew this, but they actually use a car battery to fire that thing. If you've ever seen it, it's kind of old school. They literally pull a car up there. Who's got a car? And they bring the truck over or whatever, and they hook it up. Something that's interesting about that, Clint Boyer, who we interviewed last week on this program, and there's his Forbes articles up this week too. Check out my stuff on Forbes. I wrote a great article about that. Of course, I'm a little biased. All my articles great, but here and there. But one thing Clint Boyer said on a couple weeks ago on the broadcast was that he called it he didn't call it a siren, he called it a horn, which really didn't sit well with them. So they've invited him and Kevin Harvick down to actually see the siren and maybe sound it themselves. And I hear tell, this is just a little bird telling me that Fox is already putting something together and that's going to happen. And we're going to see that on TV real soon. So in my mind, it was a great race. It was kind of good versus evil because Denny Hamlin was battling him for the win there towards the end. And then the second to last restart, Hamlin got loose coming into turn 3 and 4, spun out, didn't have it, that took away his chance for winning. And famously, of course, Hamlin knocked Elliott out of the way at Martinsville in 2017. We all remember that. So I thought it was kind of good to see the good versus evil, although I thought it was kind of a fitting touch that Chase Elliott wore that black cowboy hat in his post race, which was kind of funny. So, I think the one reason the race was good is because Kyle Larson didn't stink up the show. And that's because he led 77 laps from the pole, won stage 1, looked like he was going to be the dominant car. He was going to be the one to beat. Inexplicably lost a wheel 8 laps after he had changed it under a caution. He changed it, came back out. Everything was fine. He did report that he was feeling something weird in the car. Well, it was weird because the tire came off. That set him back 2 laps. He made those 2 laps up, which I thought was amazing. And for a brief time, I thought maybe he could run back up there and make it happen. But alas, it wasn't to be. And I think that was a good thing because I think it gave everybody else a chance. And it turned into a pretty exciting race. But I know, and something you pointed out, Owen, the story of Chase Elliott, which was obviously the big story of the day of that race and him winning, that was the big story. But you also pointed out there were some other good stories along the way as well.
Yeah, there were some guys I haven't seen running even in the top 10 who were running up front. Harrison Burton led a few laps. Zane Smith, who moved to Spire this year, was up running in the top 5. Both of those were caught out by track position. Burton ended up finishing 28th. Zane Smith ended up finishing 26th. But Smith's Spire teammate, Carson Hocevar, got a top 10. So it was some strong performances from cars that we haven't seen running up front so much throughout the year. The other thing is I think that was so good about this race for me was that Fox highlighted the racing throughout the field, even back when Larson was running in 25th, for instance. Passes might be difficult, but they were doable, and Fox let us see that on the TV. The one thing also from Larson is that clean air was still a big disadvantage, less than it has been at Texas, but it made passes difficult, and it still wasn't the perfect passing racetrack that we've come to expect on the mile and a half with the next gen.
It was a good race overall, though. You're right. The passing wasn't at a premium. Clean air was still the king. But it was, and like you said, I noticed that too on the TV broadcast. They weren't necessarily focusing on the front, which you can't really blame them. I mean, if somebody's dominating, you've got to find other stories, and they did an admirable job. I know they get a lot of complaints, but there's only so many cameras. There's only so many camera angles. You can't catch everything. They had the fire on pit road, which messed up Tyler Reddick's strategy of the day. because he couldn't, his pit was messed up. He had to stay out an extra lap, so that kind of messed him up. But we had some green flag runs. We had a lot of cautions, a record number of cautions, 16 cautions, including the final one, which was broke the record for 1.5 mile tracks with 400-mile races. So all in all, Texas was a good race. And you know what? If that was the only race this weekend, it would have been a great weekend. But we had some other great races too. Kyle Busch on Friday night tied Todd Bodine with 6 truck wins there at Texas. Now, normally when you got Kyle Busch leading a race and dominating like he did, it stinks up the show, right? You can go, order a pizza and walk away, because Kyle Busch, when he normally gets out there, he takes over and forget about it. You don't look back. Not so on Friday night. He actually had to race Corey Heim hard, and it was only 1/112th of a second, 112th of a second win. So it wasn't an easy task at all for that, but he did end up winning, and that made that a good race. But you know what?
And it shows how impressive Corey Heim has been this year. Exactly.
Corey Heim has been impressive this year. And Kyle Busch can only do 5 events. So we'll see a chance for Corey Heim to shine. But I know you covered the Xfinity race on Saturday, and man, what an Xfinity race that thing was, because there at the end, we've got everything going on at the end, and it was one of the closest finishes in Xfinity racing history.
It was tied for the second closest finish in the series history at 0.002 seconds between Sam Mayer and Ryan Sieg, who was going for his first win in the series ever. Bit of a heartbreaker for Sieg, lost out by that tiny interval, but a great finish, great battling on the last lap, came down to the last lap, obviously came down to the last corner.
Yeah, and it was an incredible finish, and you're right. 2 1,000ths of a second was just amazing. And I knew you would know, because you wrote the race story, that it was the second closest finish in Xfinity history. And it's one of those finishes where it grabs your attention, right? And you think that was the highlight of the weekend. And in close concert with what Kyle did on Friday and that close win. And then of course we had NASCAR's most popular driver winning on Sunday. So all in all, Texas, you fooled me. You're still not as big as Alaska, but you fooled me. I really didn't think. I thought we were going to end up with another 1.5 mile kind of snooze fest, but you know what? I think it just goes to show the measure of what these next gen cars can do on a 1.5 mile track. And you can make that argument for the Cup Series, but look, you still had good racing with the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. So all in all, this weekend, I think Texas delivered, and had a great weekend. I'm sure you agree.
I think since the repave, which has been controversial, they changed the entire layout of the track. Some reporters at the track were saying the track has gotten increasingly worn. And I think that we're seeing that kind of racing. It looks like there's some wear in the track. There's more lines, and it's a little bit better racing than it has been.
Yeah, and I think that made the difference. I really do, because and that repave was in 2017, so it's had a couple of years to age and laid some rubber down. And all in all, a good weekend. And I'll tell you, I was, Texas ran the spring race from 04 to 19, I believe, and now they're back to the single spring race. And I know officials there are happy for that, because they don't, even though they're not in the playoffs anymore, they don't have to compete with the NFL. And I'll tell you, it looked from what I could see that the crowd was pretty healthy, which is just as important as when you start looking at TV numbers and things. And that got my attention too, the fact that it had a really healthy crowd, great weather, and great racing. So, we got to wait another year until we get back to Texas, and we won't see them in the playoffs this year. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's good for everybody involved. And if they have the crowds like they did this weekend, more power to them. Sell all those tickets and get every butt in every seat, and we'll be fine. So we're on to the next 1.5 miles, which is Charlotte, going to be the 600, NASCAR's longest race. I'll be there for that. So I'm looking forward to the next 1.5 miles now. And I can't say that every year. The 1.5 miles seem to pile on one another, and weren't necessarily the most exciting races in the world. So it's good to see it, and we'll look forward to the next 1.5 miles. Something that came out this week, speaking of the Xfinity Series, is the CW is starting their broadcasts early. They're going to start in August now, right after we come out of the Olympic break, a 2-week break. And I thought that was, I don't understand the reasoning behind that, because usually when you sign these TV contracts, it's set in stone. I'm sure there's a reason somewhere. Of course, we got the PR reason. We're excited and get started, blah, blah, blah. But it'll be interesting if it ever comes out to understand and find out behind the scenes why the hell the CW started early. I don't get that. And another note, look for Rick Allen to move from the NBC booth for the Cup Series, replaced by Lee Diffie, which I think Lee Diffie's a great guy, great announcer. So is Rick Allen. But Rick Allen will move to the CW to cover the Xfinity Series. And I'm sure that was the intention all along, and they probably weren't going to announce that till the end of this year. But now with the CW coming on early for Xfinity, the rumored move of Rick Allen going over to that booth is going to happen, and we'll see Lee Diffie. Lee Diffie, a very accomplished broadcaster, Australian, great guy, and he calls IndyCar races, and he's called some NASCAR races in the past. So it'll be fun to see, but that'll start in August, and we'll look forward to that. Can you get the CW over in England? I don't know.
I guess we'll take it day by day, but I'm definitely excited just with the amount of coverage we have 4 networks as opposed to 2 next year to maybe get some new commentators. I love Lee Diffie. I love his commentary in IndyCar. A couple of times he's done NASCAR I've seen back in years ago. And I've always looked forward to him coming back in the booth. So I'm glad we're going to get to see him on NBC later this year.
I know, and I lived in Australia for a short time and loved it over there. I've always said that when I retire, which I'm not going to do, but if I were to ever retire, I'd like to go to the nearest Australian embassy and defect. Just a different vibe over there, and different places. And of course, we had the tragedy this weekend. I would be remiss in not mentioning that the tragedy at Bondi Beach with the idiot who got what he deserved, but the tragedy over there. So my heart's with all the people in Australia who've had to endure that. On to happier things, I got to talk to one of my favorite people this weekend. I talked to Jimmie Johnson on Saturday morning. He was at Texas Motor Speedway making one of his rare starts of the weekend. I'm not going to talk about the race because it wasn't really. He has admitted to himself he's not very good with these new cars and he's got to learn. But he was there. He is in such a happy place. His 2 girls are growing up. His wife is they're living part-time in England. And so there you go. You got a neighbor over there. But I talked to Jimmie about for an article for Forbes, but we also talked about some other things, and it was a great time to be able to talk to him. So here is my interview. What a way to spend a Saturday morning with 7-time NASCAR champion Jimmie Johnson. All right, I am talking to one of my favorite people of all time. Notice I didn't say favorite drivers because he is one of my favorite drivers, but he's also one of my most favorite people of all time. Jimmie Johnson, 7-time NASCAR Cup champion, an all-around great guy, talking to us from Texas Motor Speedway this morning. Good morning, Jimmie. How are you, my friend?
Well, thank you for the compliments, man. I appreciate it.
Well, you've always been a cool dude. I mean, really, you're the kind of guy, like I've always told people that back in the days when you were winning everything and all that, and I said, it's just a great time to be watching this, to be around to see it. And I always told people, because they would say, "Hey, the corporate guy," and he's like, I said, if you could ever get to hang out with Jimmie Johnson, he's the type of guy who's your coworker who you go have a beer with after work, and it's just that kind of guy to just hang out with. And you've always been, you've never changed from that. You've always just this most humble guy who has a great life and a great career. And I'm always happy to talk to you. And what I wanted to talk about today is something that I know you and I have seen, because I remember when you first started in this business, and we cut coming up through the ranks, and you had Lowe's as a sponsor, great sponsor. They sponsored the racetrack, for God's sakes. We had Lowe's Motor Speedway. They sponsored you for a number of years, and they had the signage on the car, and you did the commercials, and it was kind of a traditional sponsorship in the terms of, they had the sponsor on the car, and you did appearances and everything. But you didn't really get anything kind of tangible out of it. They give you a lawnmower or something, and things like that. And of course, they were great partners. and maybe a generous employee discount. But now we kind of we've kind of evolved in the last couple of years. I've noticed that the trend in the last couple of years has and it's something that seems to be growing, is the fact that you don't just get sponsors that sign a check and put signage on the car. You also get some tangible things out of them that you can use on the race team. And it kind of started with the Microsoft Pro tablets that they issued a couple of years ago, and that was something that kind of helped the race team. And now, have you noticed this trend where you get these technical kind of partnerships where it's not so much about the checks they write, but sometimes the stuff that they can give to the race team?
Yeah, it's an ever-changing landscape, as you know, and I think there are so many lanes for content that the traditional marketing has many more options today than they ever did. And in some ways, I think motorsports and the relationships and partnerships that are coming about kind of go back to the roots, where we are a test bed for new technology. And 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was really about the cars and the auto manufacturers, and what they would race on Sunday, they would try to sell on Monday. But technology has many facets to it, and as motorsports continues to evolve, the technology that we bring in to create safety and or speed on track continues to evolve. We're racing in a spec car now, so we're not building widgets like we once did, and the technology is now shifted into quality control, shifted into safety, software, a variety of lanes that we just didn't really explore or have access to in the past because of the rules and where we needed to race and where we could find the best return on investment. But as the margins get smaller and the cars are more equal, we're racing in these finite little areas. Safety's now in these finite little areas, and thank goodness for that. The advent of soft walls and Hans devices and all that has really taken a big chunk out of the safety issues we've had. So now we're in those small little areas, and we love these new partnerships that come about, and love being able to implement them in our racing world. And I heard a stat the other day that 1 year in racing is 10 years of experimentation and research and development in the real world. Just the frequency and the conditions we put products through, it would take 10 years outside of the motorsports world to work through these life cycles of products.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. I mean, that's a good analogy. The fact that 10 years. So this most recent partnership, D3O, the focus is on drivers' comfort and the safety aspect of it. And like you said, it's those little things now that you can focus on. So now you've got this partnership with D3O. When it came about, what did you find interesting about it, and really how the added value to the race cars and race teams and the drivers themselves, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing our competition department get excited about new technology. We're so regulated anymore that it's tough to find meaningful advancements. It's just small little details, and the new relationship we have really got our department excited, largely from a safety standpoint. And with the new car that's come about in NASCAR and the stiffness that's in the vehicle, there's been some unintended consequences that come with it. It's safer in many more extreme incidents for crashing, but some of these minor crashes are a bit more tricky than they ever were. And so the products that we're now working with and trying not only create a bigger boundary or a bigger window of safety, there's also some fatigue elements that really come into play with these new materials that we're integrating. This might sound crazy, but the vibration that comes through the car and being able to dampen that vibration, certainly to the driver, helps from a fatigue standpoint in these physical vehicles that we got to wrestle around the racetrack.
You talk about the safety and the comfort, and you're right. NASCAR has come so far with the safety, and now this company's kind of helping that, but also the comfort, like you said, the vibrations. I've taken rides with you on a racetrack. But I remember talking to Carl Edwards when I worked with Carl Edwards on some things, and he took me around in a race car, and this was in Atlanta, and he was explaining the nuances and the vibration, like you talked about, and the different things. But one thing he stood out to me and said, he said, it's not necessarily about the technical part and the engine, because we've really got that on the edge, right? We've got that there. He said it's the confidence that we as drivers have when we go into the corner, knowing that we can stick that car in the corner, that we can push it a little farther because of the fact that we have the confidence in the car. Do you think that now, with that extra added safety advantage and that extra added comfort, and comfort in this part is not the, putting your feet up, it's just the comfort knowing that you've got a little more, you're a little stronger in terms of, fatigue and different things. Do you think that gives you a subconscious, and your drivers a subconscious kind of advantage and help instill that little extra margin of confidence, knowing that if something bad does happen, the bad's not going to be as bad as it was before?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, crashing hurts. We all know that. And, D3O's technology that they brought on board, thankfully, I've yet to really test it. And I hope that I don't personally have to test it anytime soon. But man, those moments stick with you. And when it stings, it's like touching a hot stove. You're like, man, I don't want to do that again. If it was warm and you end up touching it again and you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought, you get a little more confident around the stove. And it's the same thing in a car. I mean, you stick one in the wall and you're like, man, that really hurt. You subconsciously think about that when you're in situations. And if you're able to really manage those subconscious thoughts in a different way, especially in a world where we're dealing with, percentage points, single digit percentage points that really separate first to last. And that's from the technology standpoint for speed in the cars to really the driver's commitment and the driver's talent. The entire field's qualifying, within a half a second. That's actually a big spread in a race anymore. It's probably less than that. So any little anything in those small little margins are making such a difference in today's world.
Joey Cohen, I talked to Joey Cohen, and one of the things he said that these cars, these next gen cars now, are akin to the GT3 cars, sort of. And it's kind of opened up the European kind of commonality to major racing series, and it's exposed you guys to technical partners that you may not have otherwise thought about. And it seems like that played into this D3O thing, because you just weren't building these kind of cars, just a few years ago. I know, and I don't know if you're living there now, but I know you were in London. You lived in London, and that kind of exposed you to the European kind of fan and the European way of doing things in terms of motorsports. Were you exposed to that kind of commonality? And do you agree that you've kind of opened up the technical side and we could see more of this in the future?
Yeah, I think so. And there's a big shift in evolution of motorsport right now. It's obviously very expensive, and the manufacturers are reluctant to get into series where you just have to spend to win. They don't mind spending, certainly if they're developing new technology and it's covering their marketing objectives, but it's just getting expensive. And you see this, except for really Formula One, you see this global shift to create commonality to help drive down expense. But as you do that, we're going to race in different areas. And I think it's putting a big, certainly in NASCAR, to speak specifically to that, we all buy the same parts from the same suppliers. And so how do we find an advantage within that? It's really taking a hard look at the components that we're able to purchase and using software to evaluate, to catalog them, to figure out how to put those pieces together to build the best car for a short track, intermediate, and super speedway. And so it's opening up new areas to race, and it's all tech-based, a lot of software-driven components. And it's just a different form of racing. Back in my heyday, we were a manufacturing facility, and the rule book was much thinner than it is now, and we had these gray areas to work. So it's just, but it's very expensive. So just as time goes on, it continues to evolve. But what's really neat is it's paralleling a path that exists within the OEM world and within cars and technology that we're using as a society on a daily basis. So that connection point to market and to do R&D is still there. And that's what racing's about. It really is that R&D bed for people that are building widgets to software and marketing for all those companies as well.
Let's finish up with this. I was a fan of you when you were winning all the championships and winning all the titles. And I'm just as big a fan now that you've kind of transitioned away from full-time racing. You are the closest thing, and this is a term I know you and I are familiar with. You become like this gentleman racer, which I really think is cool. You've raced in the Daytona 500. You've raced in the Indy 500. You've raced at Le Mans. You've got all this cool bucket list kind of races that you've done. What is a bucket list item on gentleman racer Jimmie Johnson's radar?
I've kind of checked most of the boxes, and I don't have a new one per se. Maybe Monaco, racing something at Monaco. There's no chance for a Formula One car, but maybe something there to really drive a car in anger around the streets of Monaco would be something I haven't done. But I would love to circle back to Le Mans. I love the 24 hours of Daytona. Obviously, my time here in NASCAR and being a team owner there are marquee events, and then just tracks that I love to race on. And I'm going back to Dover, Delaware this year, and some people within our industry are scratching their head as to why I'd want to go back there. It's really simple. I love the track. It's my favorite track to drive on, so I want to go back. So I'm really having fun, and I feel like, maybe this is a bad analogy, but musicians have the great fortune to play their instrument deep into their life. And a race car is my instrument. I just love to drive, and I might not hit my competitive objectives or be at my peak, but that's not important to me. I love the sport. I love to be a part of it. I want to help my race team grow. I want to help the sport grow, this industry grow, and I want to be involved.
That's the most perfect analogy ever, really. I mean, I love that. And I'll ask you this: Owen Johnson, who is our co-host, is an 18-year-old kid. He lives in London. He's from Virginia, but he's going to law school in London. I've given him assignments over the years. His last one was to eat a Martinsville hot dog. He filled that out. Are you going to back to England? Are you going to live in England again? Are you living there part-time, or?
Yeah, we're there right now, and I'm traveling back and forth as often as needed for the race team. But enjoying our time in England. It's for a short stay. We're not there long term, but we're enjoying it right now.
Okay, I've given him assignment, and this is the reason I mentioned this. Living in London, he's got to get a watch party for NASCAR in a pub.
Yeah,
in a pub. So, what would be, because I know he's going to do it, but what's your advice for Owen and getting a watch party in a pub in London?
Keep the pints flowing, from what I can tell. The pub culture has been a really fun adventure for me. Of course, bars here in the States are what they are, but especially a pub in the countryside. I mean, it is a meeting place for families. You have dogs sitting on the floor, kids running around, the parents in there enjoying a Sunday roast. The patrons, the owner, there's this community and just this experience in pubs that is really, really awesome. Living in London, it's a little different, but there still is that community feel that you have. That's your neighborhood meeting point. So I've truly enjoyed it, and I've had some great meals. They might need a little salt. There's a lack of salt on British food, but other than that, it's a lot of fun.
Jimmie, thank you, my friend. As always, and I knew it would be, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I don't care what you do as a gentleman racer, whether it's whatever, I always wish you the best of luck and the best of success. And have fun in Texas this weekend, too.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good to see you.
And that was Jimmie Johnson. Look for the article coming up in the coming weeks when I get around to it about the new technologies and innovations they're using over there. I just think it's kind of interesting that instead of just writing checks nowadays, a lot of sponsors are having tech alliances, and that's what this company's doing. And I thought it was very, very interesting. But it's always interesting to talk to Jimmie Johnson. He is that type of guy that if you had as a coworker, he would be the guy that you would want to go hang out and drink beers with on a Friday night and eat chicken wings. He's just that nice of a guy. And anytime I get to talk to him, obviously we recorded the interview, but we talked for a lot longer than that, which I was grateful for. just catching up on kids and everything and how that's going. So look for that in a couple weeks. But as I mentioned, Owen, he didn't really set the world on fire at Texas Motor Speedway. But he was talking about the differences in the next gen car and the fact that he's got to get used to it.
Right. We talked about last week that the next gen car is significantly different than sort of the stock car model we've had for the past couple of generations. And he said in comments at Texas Motor Speedway that I've watched that he likes to drive his car, he described it, off the right rear, whereas this car has to be driven off the right front, which implies that the older cars are looser, loose as fast, whereas this car is more prone to understeer. And I think you can kind of see that in some of the characteristics of the car. Hamlin's spin, for instance, when air pushed over the front, that sent him spinning in front of behind Chase Elliott. We talked about that. But also, I think it's part of why Jimmie Johnson and even Kyle Busch, to an extent, have struggled in this car when they were so good in the previous generation. It's just a significantly different car to drive.
I wonder if they're ever going to catch up. I mean, I can understand, Kyle and them who race this car every week, but Jimmie doesn't race it every week. So, and I guess you're right. You can only do so much in a simulator. You really can't. You're really not going to get the weight and the feel the same as on track. So, I hope he does well. But you know what? I think at the end of the day, Jimmie's just happy racing, regardless of what it is. I mean, how many race car drivers can say they've raced in the Indy 500, they've raced in the Daytona 500, and like I mentioned to him to Le Mans. And he talked about, he'll never go into F1, but if he could do something around Monaco, would be on his bucket list. So, he's what I call, and like I mentioned to him, he's what I call an old-fashioned gentleman racer who can pretty much pick and choose and have a great life. And like you said, he'll be in England. So, now you've got the Jimmie Johnson advice, the like the uncle. You're like, Uncle Jimmy's told you now, keep the pints flowing, man. So when you get back over there, you still got to work on that assignment.
All right.
All right. So there you go. All right.
Just rant and rave like you do to the TV during sport.
Okay. Not too many rants this week, not after Texas, because what can you rant about? Because Texas was a great race. There were still some people complaining, but you're going to complain no matter what. These are the people that, if you win the lottery, they would complain about having to pay taxes. So I mean, it was a great race. But my one big rant when it comes to Texas is, what in the hell is Texas Motor Speedway and NASCAR's obsession with Dr. Phil? I do not get this. Texas Motor Speedway is the only place I've ever seen Dr. Phil show up. He's not really a doctor, by the way. Google that. And don't get me wrong. He does some good stuff and he's got a great show. I'm sure. I don't watch it. But he's just this kind of, I don't know, really weird character. And the only time I've ever met him, and I hesitate to say it, was probably back in 2006, in 2007 at Texas Motor Speedway, of course. Him and his wife showed up in fire suits. And this to me was bizarre. And I remember specifically that every one of us in the media that day kind of felt uncomfortable seeing him and his wife in these matching fire suits. I mean, that was just the dumbest thing ever. Now, fortunately, he did not have a fire suit this weekend at Texas. But I almost wonder if the former president at Texas, Eddie Gossage, who's a great guys, helped Texas Motor Speedway and helped NASCAR, is now retired. I almost wonder if Dr. Phil's got some dirt on him. And that's why Dr. Phil does so much at Texas Motor Speedway. I don't know, whatever, as long as it doesn't affect the racing, which it doesn't. And thank God he did not wear a fire suit this weekend. So let me ask you, Owen, got any rants for this week?
I mean, I think the extent of the rants is I think the extent of the rants is, how can you complain about the mile-and-a-half racing? We saw so many people complaining about going to Texas, and I agree Texas has put on some poor races over the past couple of years, I admit, but the mile-and-a-half product in this car, there's problems with the short track, there's problems with the road courses, I completely agree, but this car is really good to the mile-and-a-halves. It creates more parity through the field. It allows drivers to make moves with less aero than the previous car had. And sure, we could do things. We could add horsepower. We could add tire wear. But for the most part, the mile-and-a-halves this year have been really good.
So there you go. For those of you ranting about mile and a halves, y'all just shut the hell up. Because I think I agree with Owen. The racing, the quality of the racing has improved. Those are the meat of our schedule. So hush. All right. Before we move on, I would be remiss in not mentioning the passing of Bob Labonte, who was the father of Terry and Bobby Labonte, two great champions. He passed away at 90 last week, and he did a lot for this sport, and obviously giving us two great champions and great race car drivers. And we're sad at his passing, but I would be lucky to live to the age of 90. Rest in peace, Mr. Labonte. We will miss you. All right, let's talk about moving on to Indy. Kyle Larson's going to do something that hasn't been done since, I think, 2017. Kurt Busch was the last one, who ran the Indy 500 and then ran the Coke 600 in the same day. And I remember that Kurt came down in the helicopter and they landed him on the infield. Well, Kyle Larson's going to do it. And will he be more successful? I don't know. He was at Indy testing this week. He's already done his rookie test. He's already done a test at Phoenix. There was supposed to be a 2-day test, I think 2 or 3 day test at Indy this week. It was rain shortened to just 1 day and actually one morning. He had the second fastest lap of the day. And somebody asked him if that shows if he'll be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to really say because like I just think I got like a magic draft and laid a lap down, but so I really don't know. I don't know how to answer that, but I think I still have a lot of time to learn, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like I saw Twitter was going crazy because Kyle Larson was second in first IndyCar practice with people, but like there's a lot of people that weren't drafting out there or didn't have like the draft that I had. So it's I take the credit, but it's really not a big deal either.
So he also said that with the rain, that rain follows NASCAR, so maybe he was the fault. That's why they had rain. But we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting. I love watching the Indy 500. I normally watch it from the media center at Charlotte. So it'll be great to see, and then see the conclusion of Kyle returning there, and we'll see how the double goes for him. I remember Tony Stewart completed it 1 year, and then of course Kurt had a fantastic run at the Indy 500, and then a decent run at the Coke 600. So it'll be interesting to see how much Kyle can pull off. I think he's definitely got the talent. Will he win Indy 500? That would be a tall order, no matter the talent. I just don't think the experience is there, but I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to be competitive. And obviously the Coke 600, I think this guy's a machine. So in terms of being in shape and being ready for it and being able to do it, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But you know what? I look forward to it. I'll be there and look forward to seeing it. What time's the Indy come on in England, or do they even show it in England?
They might show that just for how big a race it is. I know I have friends who've heard of the Indy 500, but not the Daytona 500. So I think it's a bigger race.
Well, if we can get the watch party for NASCAR somewhere, you could piggyback that on and do the Indy 500 and have that as well. But I know the Indy 500 will start earlier in the day, so I think if Coke 600 starts at like 6 or 7 at night, that's like 3 in the morning to you. It's 6 hours ahead, right? If I remember right.
It's 5 hours ahead. Yes.
5 hours. Okay, 5 hours. So yeah, so we'll see if you want to stay up all night and do that. We'll see. Okay, this week heading to Talladega. I love this place, the chaos it brings, the racing it brings, the controversy it brings. I think it could definitely cause some madness, Texas style. And some of my favorite races I've ever watched and ever covered have been at Talladega. I remember seeing 2 waitresses fight at the Waffle House in Talladega. So there are a lot of memories at Talladega. Looking forward to that race. Do you have any memories at Talladega, my friend?
Well, I'm not lucky enough to have gone yet. We'll get there one day, but I mean, I think just every year it puts on, especially I think the spring race for me always puts on a great race. I remember, I think Chase Elliott won, I think it was the spring race last time
Yep.
he won, which was, it's always a big win for Chase Elliott, but especially at Talladega, that crowd went wild. So I think he's got a good shot to back up his win at Dega, and we'll see if the Elliott fans can come out and support him.
Oh, I mean, he is a demigod there. And back in 2015, Dale Earnhardt Jr. won. I think the state was going to shut down because the year before he had gotten bumped out of the way, and I thought there was going to be a riot. But he won in 2015. I remember Dale Earnhardt's last win came at Talladega, and it was just like he did this incredible performance where he went through. He just kind of went through the field. And I remember it being mesmerized by that. And I believe that was 2000, 99, 2000 when he did that. And it was just an incredible run. It was his last win, which was great. So a lot of great memories of Talladega. Looking forward to that. William Byron's looking forward to it. And he brings up a great point that he's never won there, but he brought up a great point that the Spring Dega race is about looking forward to the playoffs and the race at Talladega in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you go to Talladega, it's pretty unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen, but our drafting has been pretty good, but you never know how much, you don't want your luck to run out in a sense. So you just got to be a good pusher, got to be able to get pushed well, do all the little things right. I think we know in the Cup Series who the good drafters are, and there's a few out there to try to work with and be around, and just try to have a solid weekend. You can't really control the result there, but you can try to get some good stage points and try to be a good drafter and learn, because that race in the playoffs is huge.
All right, so next time we talk, Owen will be back in England. We will have had the Talladega race, so we'll see how that happens. And we'll also talk about, I'm supposed to talk to Bubba Wallace this week, so we should have an interview with Bubba Wallace and all kind of things. Owen, safe travels, my friend. I appreciate it. I'm glad you had fun at Martinsville. I'm glad you ate the hot dog.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate getting the chance to go there. Got some good coverage in, so follow along cupscene.com for more.
And follow Owen on Twitter. I'm always trying to retweet him. So, and just don't bug him during exams. You got exams coming up, right?
Yes, our end of the year exams.
Okay, so got exams. Don't bug Owen during exams, but after that, you got to go to a pub, watch a NASCAR race, and maybe set up an Indy 500 watch party. Safe travels, my friend. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate all your hard work. We will talk again next week. Ladies and gentlemen, look for my stuff on cupscene.com, Owen's stuff on cupscene.com, my stuff on Forbes. Other than that, peace out. Don't rant. Enjoy your week. We will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.
There's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.